I should have known the rehearsal dinner would be a disaster the moment I walked into the country club ballroom and saw the seating chart. My name was at table 9, tucked in the back corner near the kitchen doors, while my younger sister Melissa occupied the center table like a queen holding court. Sarah. My mother rushed over, her smile tight and practiced. You're late. We were about to start without you. I glanced at my watch. I was actually 10 minutes early, but I'd learned long ago that arguing with my mother was pointless. Traffic was heavy coming from the city. Well, you're here now. Go find your seat. Quickly. She waved me off dismissively, already turning back to greet the arriving guests with far more warmth than she'd shown me. I made my way through the crowd, recognizing faces from both families. Melissa's fiancé Brandon came from old money, the kind of family that summered in the Hamptons and had buildings named after them. This wedding was my mother's crowning achievement, a chance to finally have the society connection she'd always craved. The irony wasn't lost on me. Dinner began with the usual speeches. Brandon's father stood up, champagne glass raised, talking about family legacies and bright futures. My father beamed like he'd personally arranged the match. Then came my mother's turn. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, she began, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when performing for an audience. As most of you know, Melissa has always been destined for greatness. Brandon is so accomplished, a senior associate at Morrison & Pierce, one of the most prestigious firms in the state. She paused for the appreciative murmurs. Of course, not everyone can be as successful, she continued, and my stomach dropped. I knew that transition. Our eldest daughter Sarah works at the Courthouse. She's a clerk there. Very stable work. Reliable. Not glamorous, but someone has to do those jobs, don't they? 40 heads turned to look at me with varying degrees of pity. I felt my face flush hot. Brandon's mother, Patricia, a elegant woman dripping in pearls, smiled kindly in my direction. That's wonderful, dear. Public service is so important. Oh yes, my mother agreed quickly. Sarah's always been content with simpler things. Not ambitious like Melissa, but that's okay. The world needs worker bees too. The table laughed politely. My sister Melissa smirked behind her champagne glass. I set down my fork carefully. Actually, Mom, I'm not a... Sarah, please, my mother cut me off with a sharp look. Don't be modest. There's nothing wrong with clerical work. You should be proud of what you do. I am proud, I said evenly. But I'm not a clerk. I'm a... My mother actually laughed. Out loud. In front of 40 people. Sweetheart, you don't need to exaggerate. We know what you do. You've been working at the courthouse for 5 years. It's fine. Really. Melissa leaned forward, her eyes glittering with malice. God, Sarah, are you seriously trying to make this about you? On my rehearsal dinner? How pathetic. I'm just trying to correct a misunderstanding, I said quietly. There's no misunderstanding, my father chimed in. Your mother and I are very aware of your position. We've made peace with your choices. Brandon looked uncomfortable. Maybe we should just... No, my mother interrupted. Sarah needs to accept reality. She's always had delusions of grandeur. Even as a child, she thought she was special. She turned to Patricia with a conspiratorial smile. You know how some children are just born ordinary? We love her anyway, of course. Something inside me snapped. I'd spent the last 5 years sending my parents $2,000 every month. I'd paid for Melissa's entire undergraduate degree, $87,000 over 4 years. I'd covered the down payment on their retirement condo in Florida. I'd written checks for car repairs, medical bills, and countless emergencies that always seemed to arise right before my paychecks cleared. And through all of it, I'd never once corrected their comfortable fiction about what I actually did for a living. I pulled out my phone. What are you doing? My mother hissed. Put that away. This is a formal dinner. I ignored her, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I needed. The phone rang twice. Margaret, it's Sarah. I'm so sorry to bother you on a Friday evening, but I need a favor. My mother's face turned red. Sarah Elizabeth, hang up that phone right now. I'm at my sister's rehearsal dinner at Riverside Country Club, I continued calmly. There seems to be some confusion about my employment. Would you mind coming over for just a few minutes? I know you're nearby. Of course, dear, came the warm reply. I'm actually just finishing dinner at the club myself. I'll be there in a moment. I ended the call and set my phone down. The table had gone completely silent. Who did you just call? Melissa demanded. A colleague, I said simply. My mother's laugh was shrill. A colleague? Sarah, stop this nonsense. You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing all of us. I think we should wait and see, I replied. The next 15 minutes were excruciating. My family tried to continue the dinner as if nothing had happened, but conversations kept trailing off. People kept glancing at me, then at the entrance. Brandon's father, a senior partner at a major law firm, looked thoughtful. Sarah, where did you say you went to law school? I didn't, I said. But it was Yale. Class of 2016. My mother nearly choked on her wine. Yale? Sarah, what are you talking about? You went to state school. For undergrad, I clarified. Yale was for law school. Melissa laughed sharply. You did not go to Yale Law. I would have known. Mom and Dad would have known. I paid my own way, I said quietly. Loans and scholarships. I didn't need your help. My father's face was turning purple. This is ridiculous. Sarah, I don't know what game you're playing. The ballroom doors opened. Chief Justice Margaret Chin walked in, still wearing her formal dinner attire from the judicial conference reception she'd been attending in the club's private dining room. At 72, she commanded respect with just her presence. Two of her clerks followed behind her, looking confused but obedient. The entire room fell silent. Margaret scanned the crowd, spotted me and smiled warmly. Sarah. There you are. She crossed the room with purpose and 40 pairs of eyes followed her movement. When she reached our table, she placed a hand on my shoulder. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said pleasantly, though her tone suggested she knew exactly what she was interrupting. Sarah, you said there was some confusion about your position? Brandon's father stood up so fast his chair nearly tipped over. Chief Justice Chin. This is an unexpected honor. Judge Morrison, Margaret nodded at him. How nice to see you. I didn't realize your son was marrying into Sarah's family. Small world. My mother's face had gone from red to white. Chief Justice? I don't understand. Margaret's smile was pleasant but her eyes were steel. I'm sorry, I don't believe we've met. I'm Margaret Chin. I've had the pleasure of working with your daughter Sarah for the past 3 years. Working with her? My mother whispered. Yes. Sarah serves as a judge on the district court. I believe she currently handles complex civil litigation and constitutional matters. Quite brilliantly, I might add. The silence was deafening. Melissa's voice came out as a squeak. Judge? Sarah's a judge. A federal judge, Margaret corrected gently. Appointed at 32. One of the youngest in the circuit. Surely you knew this. My mother opened and closed her mouth like a fish. Brandon's father was staring at me with new eyes. You're Judge Hartwell? The Judge Hartwell who wrote the opinion in Morrison v. State Board of Education. That's right, I confirmed. I cited that opinion in 3 different briefs this year, he said almost to himself. The reasoning was brilliant. Patricia pulled out her phone, her fingers flying. Moments later her eyes widened. Oh my God, Sarah, there are articles about you. Multiple articles. Rising star in federal judiciary. You spoke at Harvard last month. And Columbia the month before, Margaret added helpfully. Sarah's become quite sought after as a speaker on constitutional law. My mother finally found her voice. But you said you worked at the courthouse. You said. I said I worked at the courthouse, I agreed. I never said I was a clerk. You assumed. And every time I tried to correct you, you talked over me or changed the subject. Melissa was scrolling frantically on her phone. This can't be real. This has to be fake. One of Margaret's clerks, a young woman named Jennifer, spoke up. It's very real. Judge Hartwell is actually hearing oral arguments on Monday in a case that's expected to go to the Supreme Court. The brief alone is 60 pages. I should finish that this weekend, I murmured. My father's voice was hoarse. The money. All that money you sent us. We thought you were barely scraping by. We thought you were sacrificing everything to help us. I was helping you, I said quietly. But I wasn't sacrificing. Federal judges make $223,400 a year. The $2,000 a month I sent you was less than 10% of my income. My mother's hand trembled as she set down her wine glass. Why didn't you tell us? I tried. Multiple times. You didn't want to hear it. It was easier for you to believe I was ordinary. It made you feel better about asking for money. About giving everything to Melissa. Melissa's face was blotchy red. That's not fair. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, I interrupted. None of you did. When I tried to talk about my work, you changed the subject. When I invited you to my investiture ceremony, you said you were busy. When I published my first law review article, Mom told me not to brag. Margaret's expression had shifted from pleasant to decidedly cold. I attended Sarah's investiture. It was a beautiful ceremony. I'm sorry her family missed it. Brandon looked between me and Melissa, realization dawning. Wait. Melissa, you told me your sister was a courthouse clerk. You said she was barely making ends meet. You said your parents had to support her. I thought, Melissa started. You thought wrong, I said firmly. For the record, I've given this family $127,000 over the past 5 years. I paid for Melissa's entire degree. I covered your down payment. I've paid for cars, medical bills, and vacations. I never asked for anything back except basic respect. The room was utterly silent now. Even the servers had stopped moving. Patricia spoke carefully. Sarah, I want to apologize. We had no idea. Your mother's introduction was misleading. Deliberately so, Margaret said crisply. And I think we've cleared up the confusion now. She squeezed my shoulder. Sarah, will I see you at the conference tomorrow morning? 9 o'clock sharp, I confirmed. Excellent. And you're still planning to speak on the appellate procedure panel. Wouldn't miss it. Margaret nodded, then addressed the room at large. It's been lovely meeting you all. Sarah dear, don't let them keep you too late. You have important work to do. She swept out as magnificently as she'd entered, her clerks trailing behind. The moment the door closed, chaos erupted. Brandon's parents wanted to talk about cases. Other guests crowded around, suddenly fascinated by the courthouse clerk they'd pitted moments ago. My mother sat frozen, her careful social triumph crumbling around her. Melissa grabbed my arm. You did this on purpose. You ruined my rehearsal dinner. I removed her hand gently. No, Melissa. I corrected a lie. There's a difference. But everyone's talking about you now instead of me. Then maybe you should have asked about my life sometime in the past 5 years. Maybe you should have cared about something other than what I could give you. My father stood up, his face pale. Sarah, we need to talk about this. Privately. We really don't, I said, standing as well. I think everything that needed to be said has been said. I'll see you at the wedding tomorrow. I'm still planning to attend despite everything because unlike some people I keep my commitments. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear my mother trying to salvage the situation, her voice high and desperate as she made excuses to the other guests. Brandon caught up to me in the hallway. Judge Hartwell? Sarah? Can I talk to you for a second? I stopped tired. What is it, Brandon? He ran a hand through his hair. I had no idea. Melissa told me you were struggling. She said you needed help. I feel like an idiot. You should talk to your fiancé about honesty, I said quietly. Because if she lied about this, what else has she lied about? I left him standing there and walked out into the cool night air. My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. That was deeply satisfying. Dinner tomorrow to celebrate? I smiled for the first time all evening and typed back. Absolutely. You're buying. Fair enough. You earned it, Judge. I had. And I was done apologizing for it.